Welcome back to Palestine Bookshelf. I'm Stephen Heiner, and today we're going to be discussing No Way But Forward, Life Stories of Three Families in the Gaza Strip by Dr. Brian K. Barber. Dr. Barber was actually kind enough to send me this book. Been very patient. He actually sent it right before I left on my travels this summer, so it was waiting for me when I came back. And he was very diligent in following up with me. I had a pile of books to work through, and I was getting to this one, but he was diligent in getting back to me, and I finally have had a chance to read it. And it's wonderful in numerous ways. I would say one of the ways primarily it's wonderful is it gives us a very up-to-date account of what's happening in Gaza from families who Dr. Barber has been in touch with for decades. So the first part of the book is him going through three different narratives, pieces of people's lives where he's met them, he's talked to them, and he's sharing their story. Then the second part of the book is what happens between October the 7th, 2023 and October the 7th, 2024. And we have a bunch of WhatsApp messages, and we get perspective from the people we've had a chance to know the entire time and what life is looking like for them now. And I think this is especially important to consider in relation to the principle of Sumud, that we understand and appreciate the Palestinian principle of Sumud and staying on the land and fighting for it. But I've always said and will continue to maintain, ultimately, it's every Palestinian's choice as to what to do in a given situation. And we are seeing, in particular in this book, families choosing to leave Gaza. It doesn't mean it has to be forever, but there's only so much that can be endured. And yes, it's part of the Israeli plan, but you cannot tell people what to do with their lives. They have to make decisions that are best for themselves and for their family. And that's something that we have to continue to respect and understand. And part of how you can respect and understand it is listening to their stories. So without further ado, I'm just going to start reading from here. But I'll start with just a brief account of the first time Dr. Barber went to visit Palestine and what his interaction was like there. Through an interpreter, I spoke to many small classrooms packed with 50 or more students who were every bit as well behaved as their counterparts in the West Bank and East Jerusalem in the dozens of classrooms I had visited there. As I was leaving a classroom, one young man stood up tall and respectfully implored, "Please go home and tell the world that we are not all terrorists." At another school, a young girl penned a note in English and handed it to me shyly as I left her classroom. "By the name of God, dear sir, you are welcome here in Gaza, your small country. Me, and by the name of my friends, thanks you for visiting our school, and I hope that you will enjoy this visit. We are very pleased to see you here with us as Palestinians who like to meet foreigners and talk with them in order to tell them about our country. Finally, I wish you will enjoy your time in Gaza and will think of repeating this visit. Yours, Samira Abu Salim." Just a very lovely little note. And as you can see, they still remain their cheerfulness, their willingness to learn, their desire to socialize with foreigners despite all that has happened to them through the omission of foreigners, particularly the United States, where we supply sandwiches and we supply bombs with one hand and with the other. So as I read through each of these stories, I'm going to make sure to try to punctuate to let you know who I'm talking about now. And I'm going to start with Hammam al-Fakawi. So that's the first account here. And so I'll be reading about Hammam until I tell you that I'm reading about someone else. One morning early in the Intifada, when Hammam was 14, an IDF squad stopped him as he was bicycling to town to have copies of some paper made for his grandfather. They pointed to a burning tire and ordered him to fetch something to put it out with. Knowing that refusing would bring disaster, Hammam complied. He set his rickety bike aside, found a weathered pail, filled it with water from a small well, and doused the thick flames. Feeling troubled and uneasy, he abandoned his errand to make copies and mounted his bicycle to return home to his family. But the soldiers had other plans for Hammam. They pulled him off his bike and forced him into their nearby jeep. Soldiers from a lookout atop a nearby building had radioed down that Hammam was the boy who had set the tire on fire. Hammam pleaded, "No, I was just going to make a photocopy." And the tire, they charged? I didn't do it, he implored, to no avail. The soldiers didn't hurt him, but they took him to the police station. When Hammam arrived at the station, a plainclothes officer demanded his name, and upon hearing it, he accused Hammam of wanting to cause them problems. No, I'd never do such a thing. I never did anything to you, Hammam replied. The officer slapped his face and told the others to transport him to the military headquarters in Han Yunis city. There, a female officer, perhaps in her early 20s, set on him. You were throwing stones at the Israeli army. You were lighting tires. As two other soldiers held him by his clothes, she kicked him repeatedly between his legs and then hit him in the stomach, neck, and face. Why are you doing this to me? Protested Hammam with every little breath he had. I have done nothing to you. And keep in mind, he's 14 years old at this time. Witnessing the incident, a Palestinian woman waiting to travel south to Egypt ran up and protested. Why are you doing that? He's a young boy. He's just a child. The officer ordered her to sit down and drop the subject. That is, unless she wanted them to withdraw her application for a long-sought permit to go to Egypt. The officer returned to booting Hammam, and the two soldiers also started beating him with their hands and nightsticks. When they were finished, they took the bruised and trembling boy back to the police station, where the original soldiers began to blindfold and cuff him, presumably to take him to the nearby jail for detention. Hammam pleaded, I never did anything. You know that. You found me on my bicycle and told me to put out the fire. I did that for you. Why are you lying? Finally, the soldier seemed to relent. Okay, they said, and handed him over to a police officer who wrote down something in Hebrew. Hammam was sure it was a formal charge of having burned tires and thrown stones. The police officer then asked Hammam how his father could be reached. They didn't have a phone in their camp home, but it wouldn't have mattered anyway since all the lines to the camp had been cut. Hammam remembered the phone number of an uncle who lived in the city, outside the camp. The officer allowed Hammam to call him. He told his uncle about the detention and asked him to find his father and send him to the police station. When Fuad arrived, the main officer reiterated the accusation. Hammam again denied it forcefully. The officer called him a liar, but this time he didn't beat him. Instead, he was permitted to go home after Fuad had paid a fine of 500 shekels, more than a month's salary. In the summer of 2014, there were no safe places in Gaza, and this complicated Hammam's response to the phone call he received during the bombardment. For days, people had been streaming down their streets, fleeing the heavy bombing in the eastern villages near the border fence. The landline rang early in the morning. In broken Arabic, the caller identified himself as the local commander of the IDF. You have 10 minutes to leave. We have targeted your house to be bombed. Click. Hammam tore downstairs to consult with his father. They raced through all the central questions. Should we leave? If so, where would we go? When could we come back? Should we stay? Which is riskier, to stay or to go? Should we split the family up, some going and some staying? Or do we want to die together? They decided to stay and protect themselves as best they could because there seemed to be no safe place to go. They figured that their chances of survival might be better than other people's chances, since their house was relatively new and built to higher standards. It might withstand the barrage of shells that the tanks on the other side of the eastern fence were firing every minute. Hammam ran back upstairs, wondering where would be safest for the family. A metaphor leaped into his mind. I am a chess player contemplating a move. I am a very good chess player. His next move was to order everyone into the middle bedroom away from the outer walls, 3 kids on the bare tile floor and 2 on the bed with Shada, everyone covering themselves with the thin sleeping mats. Then Hammam laid himself at the feet of the older boys, his torso against Mohammed's feet and his legs on top of Fuad's ankles. Meanwhile, Fatima asked Hani's family to move in with her and Fuad in order to turn the family's first-room apartment into a refuge. She and Fuad pushed all the furniture out of the salon and covered the floor with as many sleeping mats as they could gather. She quickly gathered some food, but her shelter could hold only about 50 people crammed together. The rest poured down the street toward the city center. Some women were carrying their children, dazed and screaming, "Where are we? Fatima agonized. What can I tell them? There is nothing in the city center for them, and the UNRWA shelters are already overcrowded with people grieving over loved ones who have been killed, distraught about injuries, home demolitions, horror. We are waiting for a miracle. We must keep this ray of hope alive in us. This spate of shelling and bombing was a turning point for Hammam. The Strip had been bombed many times, but 51 consecutive shattering days was worse than a nightmare. Hammam and his family had handled the previous war well, but this was too much. He needed to vent into the threadbare pillow that struggled to soak up all his tears. And so the 51 consecutive days we're talking about, this is Operation Protective Edge. This would have been 2014. What is our crime? What crime have my children committed? I know the answer. You will say that we are Palestinian, and therefore we are terrorists. No, we are not. I hate war. I have always been for peace. I am against horror and terror and killing civilians. Shada has always been for peace. Fuad and Fatima only want peace. All my friends have yearned for peace, but where can I find it? There is no peace. It is just a word. Hammam knew he had to inspire the kids. The only thing he could think of was to promise them that he would take them anywhere they'd like once the onslaught ended. Of course, that anywhere had to be in Gaza, their little homeland, now horribly disfigured by the bombing. So this next passage refers to Hammam's role as a Mukhtar. Mukhtar is an honorary title. It can be translated as headman or village chieftain, but these were normally in the times in which there were villages in Palestine all throughout the landscape. Mukhtar would be in charge in that village. As Palestinian society has evolved to being in refugee camps and in these enclaves, the role of Mukhtar still matters because there's not really a governing authority in place. And to be fair, Mukhtars Mukhtars exist even alongside governing authority, but they serve as I would say, a first line of defense, in that if you have a financial conflict with a neighbor, a Mukhtar can solve that problem before you have to go sue someone in a court. And in that way, things are dealt with at the lowest level. This is, again, a Catholic principle, subsidiarity. You can see it's being shown here in Arab society as well. Try to handle things at the lowest level before having to escalate. And so Hammam is asked to arbitrate a lot of these situations. And I picked this one in particular because I thought it was an interesting one that we in Western societies may not really think about. Hammam always kept his cell phone on, even throughout the night. I have to, he insisted. I need to be available to solve problems. In fact, some types of calls came only at night. Among other things, that timing provided the necessary cover for the most difficult problems, those involving women. One night, a woman came to the house asking to see Hammam. He happened at the time to be visiting with his father in Fuad's second-floor flat. Both Hammam and Fuad heard the woman's request to see Hammam. Instinctively, Fuad's cultural antennae went off. It was unusual, to say the least, for a woman, presumably married, to show up at someone's home at night, especially if she wanted to speak with a married man. Fuad cautioned Hammam to be careful, but Hammam felt comfortable. He went to the main iron gate. The woman's face was pale with fear and her eyes dark with worry. Hammam greeted her and escorted her to his third-floor apartment. He asked Shada to make tea and then to take her leave. Try to be calm, he assured the woman. Tell me what happened. She explained nervously that on her walk home from visiting a friend, a man pulled up beside her and offered her a ride. He said he was on his way home to pick up his wife. She took the bait. Shortly into the ride, the man pulled off onto a side street and started touching her. She panicked, but was relieved when the police suddenly arrived. It turned out they had coincidentally been searching for this man, who was in trouble for other instances of harassing women. Thus, the police didn't suspect the woman of any wrongdoing. They took her ID and told her to go home for the night and report to the police station in the morning. Instead, she went directly to see Hammam. Hammam listened carefully to the story and told the woman that he would go to the police and handle the matter. This potentially serious problem required Hammam to consult with his father. Fuad's advice was that Hammam needed to keep this matter utterly private. Fuad would call the police chief and let him know that Hammam would be coming to the station to resolve the problem. When he arrived the next morning, a police officer assured Hammam that they were not charging the woman. In that case, asked Hammam, what would you like us to do? The officer said they thought it was appropriate for her to come to the station to have a final talk before they closed the case. Hammam objected. People would see her, and they would talk and insult her. Her whole family's reputation is at stake. Hammam's solution required some creativity. He asked the police to come to his house the next day, and he would arrange for the woman to be visiting. This coincidence would give the police the chance to do their follow-up talk with the woman without anyone suspecting they had come to talk to her. This coordination between the police and the Mukhtar was not uncommon. In fact, during one recent month, Hammam had been at the precinct every single day to solve one type of problem or another. Once an officer quipped, "Hammam, we want to buy a desk for you to use here while you solve all the problems of your family." Hammam finished the day by driving a friend who had no car to Gaza City, an hour's journey there and back. They timed the trip so that Hammam could be back to pick up his two older sons from their schools. Miraculously, Hammam received no calls that night from anyone else that he needed to help. And I think what's interesting there is we're in the West unfamiliar with this on two levels. One, that there's a system of a Mukhtar around. This probably still exists in some ethnic enclaves in America. But within the American culture, you could say larger American culture, whatever that means, we have no equivalent to a village Mukhtar. So we already have challenges fixing our own family problems within our own direct family. And sometimes there is no appointed Mukhtar. People jostle for position in families, whereas it's very clear in Arab families where the hierarchy is. And I think this is true in Asian families as well. Secondly, that there is so much importance placed on a woman's reputation that you don't even want to risk the appearance of impropriety, such that Hammam had to come up with this ingenious way to wrap up the police case and protect the reputation of the woman. Great work from Hammam, and I think wonderful to see how Arab society takes care of each other. I've said before, I'm not going to pretend that there are not honor killings and other problems, not only in Gaza, but in other places. But I'm trying to put a spotlight here on something positive. And I think it's worth considering just as an alternative to what you've experienced in your life, and something worth reflecting on. So this next person we're going to talk about is Khalil. And he is, you could say, a bit more politically active than Hammam. This isn't, I've said before, there is no such thing as an apolitical Palestinian, but there are Palestinians who choose to be more politically active than others. But every Palestinian is, you could say, political in one way or another. So quite early on in his life, Khalil is, you could say, in trouble with the authorities, the Israelis. And this is an account of his trip to Ansar 3, which is in the Negev. It's not called Ansar 3 by the Israelis. The Israelis call it Ketziot prison, but the Palestinians call it Ansar 3. There's also an Ansar 2, which was a tribute to Ansar, an Ansar area near Lebanon, where there was a prison. And so the Palestinians have simply iterated on Ansar, so there's Ansar 2 and Ansar 3. So here he's telling us a bit about his time there. The daily schedule was highly regulated. Prisoners were awakened at 6 a.m. by an announcement from the prison loudspeaker. They washed their hands and faces and then had 1 hour to read from the few available books. At 7 a.m., a breakfast of fool, which is cooked fava beans, coffee, and tea was brought to the tents by members of the food committee, prisoners who cooked and delivered meals. After breakfast, the prison guards conducted the first of 3 daily roll calls. Guards ordered all the prisoners to exit their tents to be counted in the open space. After the morning roll call, a doctor visited the prisoners to see who needed medications for headaches or other simple ailments. Then lessons would begin, taught by senior prisoners, many of whom were professors, doctors, or lawyers. They conducted 3 levels of lessons, depending on how much a prisoner knew about his political faction. After the lessons were over, prisoners had some free time to sit and casually talk with one another. A few years later, each tent at Ansar 3 would have a radio and a TV, but during this first year of the prison's operation, there were none. If you want to see a visual representation of this, Joe Sacco draws this in his book Palestine. I'll put a link in the description as well as a card. For me, it's a bit shocking that the Israelis allowed, when I say allowed, I'm just saying I'm thinking about this later period where the Israelis don't let the Palestinians do anything, but allowed the Palestinians to gain in knowledge and political awareness among their own people. If they thought, what would we do if we were in this situation? This is only going to make the people stronger. And so they allowed an entire generation during the First Intifada and beyond to become even more convicted in their beliefs. So for me, as I read about this and I remember the accounts of what prison conditions were like during this era, I'm really surprised the Israelis allowed this. And as I say, allowed, it's something that you can allow to prisoners, but it only helped Palestinians get a clearer idea of who they were, what they were fighting for, and created a deep notion of Palestinian identity, which had been developing since the 1920s, but in an even stronger form. Lunch, always consisting only of vegetable soup and rice, was at 1 o'clock p.m. Like breakfast, it was served in the tent because of the day's searing heat. Afterwards, there was time for napping or socializing. The second set of lessons began around 4 p.m. and lasted until around 8 p.m. Dinner, served outside in a common space, was always a replica of breakfast, but with the addition of falafel sometimes. The weather was typically warm and breezy at night. The third set of lessons, mostly discussion about the day's learning, began after dinner and lasted until the third roll call at 11 p.m. After roll call, prisoners were allowed to walk around their section of the prison and chat. At midnight, the loudspeaker announced, "Good night, return to your tents and sleep." Early during his time at Ansar III, Khalil wrote a brief letter to his parents that was delivered to them by a prisoner from Han Yunis who had just been released. Khalil urgently needed to let them know where he had been sent. Detainees were sent away after their trial and their parents weren't informed where. "My dear father and mother, I want to inform you that I am in the Negev at Ansar III. I was sentenced to 3 months of administrative detention. Please don't worry about me. It is my duty to struggle for our homeland. I am okay. I am not being tortured. Please send me some underwear." This was a 20-year-old man. When Khalil was released from prison at the end of his 3-month sentence, he returned to Gaza a stronger person. During his 18-day detention 2 years earlier, he had discovered his inner fortitude in surviving painful and degrading circumstances. At Ansar III, Khalil developed leadership skills and learned a tremendous amount about history, political theory, and activism. This intellectual and political growth in prison was so common that soon, when young men were arrested, they would say to their captors, "Good. Please take me to the Academy of the Palestinians." So now we're getting to our third profile, and this is Hussam. This is from when he was 16 years old, and he's being chased. Now, well into the residential area, he dropped down into the courtyard of a house. The startled grandmother knew exactly what to do. She darted inside, grabbed the change of clothes that many families kept on hand for a moment like this, tossed them at Hussam as he entered the house, and motioned to a room where he could change. Soldiers were becoming adept at memorizing the garb of young people so that they could catch them elsewhere in the camp. Luckily, the packet contained jeans and a t-shirt that were different colors from what he was wearing, and Hussam threw them on in a matter of seconds. It was understood that he would come the next day to pick up his own clothes. He whispered his peace greeting, "Assalamu alaikum, Hajj," so as not to awaken others, using the term of endearment for a woman old enough to have taken the pilgrimage to Mecca, required of the most faithful Muslims. Then he gently slid the bolt of the door open and slunk into the alley to the Hajj's whisper, "Peace be with you, my boy." So as he's getting into trouble with the authorities, Hussam's father wants to talk to him about the consequences of this kind of action. "What I am talking about, son, is that if you remain active in the struggle, you will certainly be detained or arrested, perhaps even taken to prison. During the harsh interrogations, the soldiers will do anything to get information out of you about others. You may not, under any circumstances, reveal the names of any other person. Doing so would be a betrayal of the cause and bring great shame upon you and the family." Continuing to look his father directly in the eye, but now no longer smiling, Hussam said with a certainty born of pure allegiance, "Father, I promise I will never do that." But Fadez kept the pressure on. "If you violate this latter condition, I will forbid you from ever returning to my home." The air in the room suddenly felt heavy as Hussam continued to look into his father's eyes. His mind and heart whirling, he held back tears in response to the harsh threat of rejection. His father had never, ever threatened him before in any way. The thought of it crushed him. But at the same time, he couldn't imagine his father ever banishing him. It just didn't fit with how much he knew Fadez loved him. What was perfectly clear to him, however, was that this was a profoundly important matter. His father seemed to be telling him that being an activist involved more than just the careful planning and execution of actions, and all the thrill, satisfaction, and fear that such planning and execution entailed. He seemed to be saying that harsh experiences were coming his way, that being a man meant being responsible not only for himself, but also for others. Before letting Hussam go, Fadez summarized his lecture in 4 rules. Rule 1, do not give them any information. Rule 2, in particular, do not implicate other people. This would hurt the person and shame you. Rule 3, do not confess any of your own behaviors. Rule 4, endure. The torture will eventually stop. If you're enjoying this content, please consider hitting like or subscribe. It's a way for people to get information about this channel, and it's an easy way for you to support what we're doing here. As he stepped back through the long faces in the hallway, everyone was silent except for the whimpering of the youngest kids. At the open door, Rosmea hugged him, and Fadez squeezed his shoulder, both assuring him, "Don't worry, son. Everything will be okay. We love you. We'll be here waiting for you. Be strong." Just a few meters outside the doorway, the captain wrapped a cotton blindfold around Hussam's head, pulled his arms behind his back, placed white plastic zip-tie handcuffs around his wrists, and cinched them into the skin. Hussam didn't resist. There would have been no point. 2 soldiers gripped his armpits, pushed him toward the waiting jeep, and then threw him onto its bed. He collided with 2 other boys who were already there, and he assumed they must also be part of the roundup. During the 15-minute drive south to the military complex in Han Yunis, everyone was silent, with the soldiers riding in the bed of the jeep, using the captives as footrests during the ride. Soldiers took the 3 boys roughly by the arms as they exited the jeep. Still silent, the soldiers marched them forward and then yanked the boys' blindfolds off their heads. They were standing outside one of several large canvas tents that filled a courtyard. A soldier unlocked the door, slashed the white zip ties, and pushed the boys into one of the tents. Inside the tent, many young people were lying on soiled bed mats set on top of simple wooden bed frames. The beds were wide enough to sleep 2. Hussam counted 12 beds and calculated 2 people per bed times 12 beds equals 24 people. He counted 50 boys. For the first 11 days, the routine was horribly monotonous. They did nothing other than force down the stale bread, sometimes rotting eggs, and gulp down the water that a guard would bring them at 6 a.m. and 6 p.m. on the dot. Keep in mind, he's 16 years old at this point. Then at 8 p.m., they'd walk single file to the squatter toilet in the shed at the corner of the courtyard where the stench was stomach-churning and a horde of huge flies whirred maniacally. The boys would talk, of course, and try to humor themselves with jokes and games, but they said little about any political activity. They all understood that one or more of them could have been planted as coerced informants, collaborators. For no discernible reason, on day 12 things changed. In the early morning after the boys had eaten, soldiers began taking Hussam and a few of the others out of the tent and placed each of them individually next to the buildings encircling the courtyard. On that day, and those that followed, the boys were ordered to assume a sitting position there, but without anything to sit on, and they were forced to stay there, sometimes for the entire day, their bare feet often directly on the sharp stones that were spread about a meter wide from the wall of the buildings. From his forced sitting position in the courtyard, Hussam could hear shrieks coming from an interrogation room inside a building. But one day, when he was placed directly below the window of an interrogation room, he heard every word and sound. The officers spoke Arabic. Stand up straight. Confess that you threw stones 2 weeks ago. Pause. The sound of a thump. Maybe the baton on flesh? Upper arms? Lower back? The boy grunted. Confess, punk. Thump, thump. A louder grunt. Okay, 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 please stop hitting me. Yes, I threw stones. Thump. You dare throw stones at our sacred soldiers? Thump, thump, thump. A long scream. Tell us the names of the others who are with you. Thump. Grunt. No, please, sir, the boy begged. I can't. Thump. Please, sir, I can't give names. Whack, whack, whack. Maybe on bone now? Knees? Head? Sharper screams. God Almighty, please stop hitting me, sir. Okay, okay. Bilal S. was with me. Who else? Whack, scream, whack, scream. Omar A. was also there. Whack. Please, sir, I can't take this anymore. A dull thump. Maybe a knee to the groin. A gut-wrenching shriek. Names! Whack, whack, whack. Louder shrieks. And on it went. Though as many as 20 names, most of them probably fake, thought Hussam, because he recognized only a few of them. Finally, the captive spurted out, bloodied mouth most likely. I can't take it anymore. I'll sign whatever you want. I'll confess to anything. Just give me the paper. I'll sign it. I beg you. Please just let me go. A few days later, his whole body quivered when Hussam was ushered into a room for his own interrogation. With the benefit of the preview, he knew what was coming, but that made it even worse. He had never been beaten before. Wondering if he'd be able to avoid pissing himself, he cringed as the dour interrogator entered the bare, white-walled room where Hussam had been ordered to stand, handcuffed and flanked by 2 junior officers, the ones who had beat him. On the way to the interrogation room, Hussam had burned into his mind a stern and insistent mantra from his father's lessons. Confess to nothing. Give no one away. Thank God he had such good mind control, because everything he was expecting to happen came blasting at him. He had guessed right. They began with the soft tissues of the upper arms, thighs, calves, and lower back, relentlessly pounding him with their batons after his every denial. No, I didn't participate in throwing stones. No, I don't know anyone who did. No, I'm not involved in fighting you. They also choked him blue and whacked his knees with their wooden sticks. He'd guessed right again. The dull thump he'd heard was a soldier's knee directly to the groin. The searing, convulsing pain was the worst agony he had ever experienced. Through his own grunts, screams, shrieks, and tears, Hussam's relentless wholesale denial seemed to throw the interrogator off. Who are your friends? I don't have friends. How come you don't have friends? My studies are the most important thing to me. I only go out to buy things for my family. Then the predictable shift to Fares. Well, what about your father? My father is a teacher and a good football player. He has nothing to do with this. Who are his friends? I don't know. Do you see anything? Any people coming, plotting things? No, I haven't seen anything. Do you? No, no, no. Then back over the same territory again and again. Do you know any people who are involved in this uprising? No, I don't know any such people. He could tell he was winning the battle when the bribes and threats began. You know, we can arrest your father if you don't tell us what we want. Do as you must. You know, we can release you if you tell us who they are. I don't know any such people. We can keep you in prison forever. Well, I have nothing to say. That's up to you. I haven't done anything. After a couple hours, the 2 soldiers dragged Hussam back to his tent. His legs pounded blue. He was unable to stand, let alone to walk. Although the 2 boys who had taken him from the soldiers tried their hardest to be gentle, Hussam screamed in pain as they set him down on one of the beds in the tent. Every centimeter of his body was on fire. Although no one could have detected it through his battered face, Hussam smiled to himself and wept. I did it. I did my duty. I confessed to nothing and gave no one away. They are not invincible. I beat them. They let him go on day 18. You might have seen me smiling through that account, and it wasn't because I was happy about what was happening to him. I was just so impressed. I was so impressed at the fortitude of a 16-year-old Palestinian boy who had been encouraged by his family as he was taken away unjustly to be beaten for a false confession for something he didn't do. And these are the sorts of people that we're dealing with. The Palestinians are incredibly strong people. Could I have taken a beating from the police at 16? I don't know. I don't know. Maybe. But to read about it is so edifying, encouraging. I just am more impressed the more I learn about Palestinian people, their culture, their way of dealing with this 100-year war against them. I'm only more impressed. I'm never less impressed with the Palestinians. So this is some years later, and he's 41 at this time. The shrill ring of the landline interrupted the still dawn. Fadez shuffled into the front room to answer it. Hussam was there preparing for his morning's lecture at the college. He often studied downstairs in a back room of the mostly unfinished ground floor of the house to escape the noise of his own apartment, what with the kids and all. As he watched the color drain from his father's face, he could hear the deep voice speaking loudly in Israeli accented English. Mr. Abu Shawish, is your front door open or closed? Such a strange question, thought Fadez. It's closed, of course. It's 5 a.m. Leave and close the door behind you, ordered the Israeli commander. You mean we have to leave our home? Replied Fadez, alarmed and perturbed at having to play this guessing game. Yes, you must go, right now. Why? Fadez challenged. Your house is scheduled to be bombed in 10 minutes. So far as his family had finally gotten the call that Hammam's family had received, along with thousands of others, it was now 30 days into the Fourth War, Operation Protective Edge, in 8 years between Israel and Hamas. This war had already lasted nearly twice as long as the 2008-2009 war that had seen 18 days of devastating bombardment from Israeli jets and drones from the sky, tank shelling from the east, and missiles from the Israeli warships that constantly patrolled 6 kilometers from the shore. Fadez raced to the stairwell and screamed the news so that all the families in the house would know what was about to happen. By now, the house had 4 stories above the ground level. Each level had 2 apartments, except the top level, which had only 1. Fares and Razmea and Hussam and Mai lived on the first floor, above the ground level. Hussam's brothers Ashraf and Mohammed and their families lived on the second floor. His brothers Allah and Omar and their families lived on the third floor, and his youngest brother, Thaer, lived on the fourth. Everyone, the Israelis say they will be bombing the house in 10 minutes. Everyone decide for yourselves if you are going to stay or leave. Your mother and I will be leaving on foot immediately. Fadez's news set off a wildfire of activity throughout the whole house. From each level came shouts of alarm and protest, as well as loud discussions of what to do. The awakening kids added to the chaos. They didn't know what was happening, but screamed in response to the sense of danger. All the parents were asking themselves the same agonizing questions. Are they really going to bomb us? Should we leave? Or barricade ourselves in the stairwell? If we leave, where will we go? How do we know if it will be any safer there? When will we come back? What will we do if they really destroy our house? Hussam's mind was racing, with no time to perform his worst-case scenario analysis. He bounded up the bare concrete steps 1 floor to find Mai already packing clothes. She looked up at him, and they needed no words to convey their fear. They had rehearsed this scenario, but now it was real. At least they knew that they were going to live in the spare room of Mai's parents' new house, which they'd built in 2012, a few kilometers away on the south side of the camp near the power plant. Let me do this, Mai. Please grab whatever we need from the kitchen. Mai rushed about, pulling the plastic containers of olive oil, salt, sugar, coffee, rice, and flour off the shelves, as well as various packets of herbs and spices. A memory finally flashed in her brain. Hussam, she cried, I just remembered that the spare room has no furniture in it. That means we'll have to take all 7 bed mats with us. I'll call Hani, a young cousin, and ask if he could take us in his car. We'll just have to stuff the beds in somehow. Mai also remembered that they had one, mostly empty, tank of propane to run a stove, and she lugged it over to the pile of goods they had amassed in the middle of the salon. Keep in mind, a clock is still ticking. There's 10 minutes to go. I know I've been reading a lot, but they're having to do all of this in seconds, minutes. Hussam paused a second to look at the large battery in the corner of the room, the precious battery he had saved up to buy for so long. Powered by solar panels during the day, it provided basic electricity for his family. Gazans had usually been permitted only 6 hours of electricity per day during those years, but now with the war it was much less, even down to only 2 hours per day. However, the battery weighed nearly 80 kilos, and the car could only hold so much. All he could do was hope to retrieve it later. So now we're into part 2, and we're going to hear from each of the profiles we've had from before, with Hammam and Khalil. And I'll tell you who we're reading from in each profile. So this first one, we're going back to Hammam. And this period between October 7th, 2023 and October 7th, 2024. I think Dr. Barber had to go to press at the end of 2024. We're now doing this review in 2025. So as I say, this is pretty current information. And I was very edified by this. This was October the 21st of 2023, so pretty early on into the genocide. And this is what Hammam says. Good morning. Yesterday, one of the students of my school where I work in Gaza City ran towards me in the street and greeted me warmly and says to me, Professor, we immigrated from Gaza City and we now live in the school. He points with his hand to a school that is about 100 meters away from us and says, you will come to teach us again. There are many students from our school in Gaza with me, but we lost the books. We came from Gaza with only our clothes on. It affected me and left a strong impact when many of the students of our school said their homes were bombed, and they were martyred, and some of them were pulled out in pieces from under the rubble, their homes. I accepted this speech with great pain, but what hurt my heart more was the brother of this young student who was not nearly 7 years old. He said to me, you are the teacher who teaches Mahmoud in the school. I know you. Come to the school. We now live there. Come and teach us there. I cried when I found out that this child wants to learn even in these very difficult circumstances. This child conveyed to me with the innocence of childhood that knowledge is a message and that there is a future. And that's something you have to realize the Naksa generation, the 1967 generation, had already been educated in UNRWA schools, but they're part of why the Palestinian population is the most literate in Arab society. Very, very literate people, because they know that education is the number one way that they can provide for their families in this circumstance. And so you see it being born out here in a 7-year-old child, having been evacuated from the north, coming down to Han Yunis, and their family's living in a school. And his thought is, I need to go get a teacher so we can learn. Can you imagine? Can you imagine how important education is in a society? That a 7-year-old child who's had to evacuate his house, the first thing he's thinking about is going to school. That should show you what Palestinian society is about. It's not what the Israelis would have you. They're about terrorist bombings and murder. They're about educating themselves about who they are, where they're from, and where they are going. And that is a society that cannot be broken. This is from later on in the year, November the 23rd. And Dr. Barber asks, what does a typical day look like for you? I sleep every night after months of exhaustion. I wake up from sleep. It's 4:30 in the morning. I go to my father and mother and sit with them until 6 in the morning. Then my father and I go out to the market to buy our daily needs. We search for necessary things everywhere. Flour, for example, a bag weighing 25 kilos costs $50 and not available. Bread must wait from 2 to 4 hours to get it. Yesterday, we were in severe suffering. We were looking for table salt. We walked about 5 kilometers asking about salt, but there was none. We buy vegetables available in the market: eggplant, potatoes, tomatoes, onions, green pepper. There is no chicken in the market. Rice, but of poor quality. I bought a bag of flour a week ago from one of my relatives with difficulty for 150 shekels. The price then rose to 250 shekels. My wife makes the bread and I bake on wood. Prices have doubled. After shopping, we return home, watch the news, and continue charging the batteries and mobile phones. Hani charges his battery in the supermarket. Wasim is charging at the hospital. I charge the battery with solar energy. It has been 47 days since the electricity was cut off. The water was cut off for 10 consecutive days. The children did not bathe for 2 weeks. The house smells very bad. All the water is not completely clean. The purification rate is 30 to 50%. We light the fire and start cooking food for the children. After cooking on the fire and eating lunch, we take a break for 2 hours so we can stay up at night. Then we begin the second journey. Wash laundry. There is a washing machine, so you wash the laundry by hand. Okay, so now we're going to talk about Khalil. And I want to start, this is from June 11th of last year, 2024. And this is from one of his children is Noor. And he's giving us the last two stanzas of this poem, which I think are remarkable. Noor published a poem titled My Mother Once Said. She surprised me. I discovered she is a potential poet. And here are the last two stanzas. I will recognize you by your voice, by your prayers, for me and for the martyrs. I will not lose my way in the darkness, for the fires of their hatred have lit up the sky. O mother, you lied for me and to yourself, and for a homeland you loved. But no one loved us, O mother, no one loved us except God. August 28th, 2024. It was 2 p.m. when I left the tent where coffee is served, just 50 meters from a friend's tent. I was the last of 3 friends. I was delayed a few seconds because I met a friend of Nesma. Just 30 seconds later, I heard a huge explosion. It was right on the path I took from the coffee place to the tent. People started to shout. The scene was very dramatic. A man I know, a journalist, was working installing access to internet with his 5-year-old. The child started to shout, Baba, Baba, but his father was dead. Another one was standing in front of the coffee tent and he died immediately. Mohammed is a very famous TikToker, speaks English very well, very intelligent. He had 2 million followers. Nesma actually trained him to code. He would sit at the coffee place to work on TikTok because of the internet. They started to pick up the bodies. At the moment, 5 people have been killed. Mohammed is one of the intellectual youths among the evacuees I know. I'd say hello to him every day. I imagine the nightmare. You see the child shouting, crying at this father while his father doesn't respond. People started to shout. Nobody knows who was killed and who was injured. The scene was very confused. Everybody shouting, and the ones who found their relatives safe, they calmed down. On the other side, people run after their fathers who are being taken to the hospital. This is what happened 2 days ago. Many cases like this. Some of it you hear about, some you witness. When I say nightmare, I imagine the darkness of this life. I am one of the Gazans who expects to die at any moment. I am one of those who doesn't know what is next. And Dr. Barber asks him on the anniversary, October 7, 2024, now it has been a year. What are your thoughts today? And Khalil responds, I am thinking of the day before the 7th of October and what we have become now. I am thinking of more than 40,000 who have been killed, 26,000 who have lost their fathers or mothers, more than 70,000 who have become disabled, 80% destruction of buildings, the massive poverty, the tens of thousands who have passed away due to the difficulty of life and lack of treatment, the destruction of education, homes, infrastructure, the absence of life. And I ask myself a question. Does what Hamas did on October the 7th merit this terrible price? I don't believe it does. Nothing is more valuable than human life. And this last is obviously from Hussam. Dr. Barber asks, what kinds of food are available? And this is in early 2024. Mostly canned food like mortadella and canned beef or chicken, beans, canned fish, sometimes vegetables at high prices. Of course, we have no fruits coming in, nor any kind of sweets or biscuits other than those coming with the relief mission trucks. Sometimes we bought stuff at 6 to 10 times the normal price. Salt was sold at 20 shekels, while it was sold at 1 shekel before this genocide. 1 kilogram of cucumber is sold at 12 shekels, although it was normally sold at 1 to 3 shekels before. Rice for 20 shekels, while 5 to 7 shekels before. Recently in Rafah, we have apples coming in that are sold at 25 shekels per kilogram and oranges at 12 shekels per kilogram. People have no liquid money to buy food. And Dr. Barber asks, are people angry at the sellers for charging such high prices? Sure, they have to buy basic stuff for a living. There is some sort of an internal betrayal. This is due to greedy sellers at the top of the supply chain who take advantage of the war. Retailers or supply resellers who try to make some money for a living. They add a few shekels as a proper profit margin. The top greedy sellers are the real problem. We cannot blame retailers. After the war, I assume people will take revenge on those greedy sellers. Some of the goods are originally sent to people for free as relief packages. Some people steal and leak goods to greedy sellers to take advantage of the control and security gap created by the war. Some of them are protected by corrupt officials. They share profit. And this is very hard to read because I think sometimes we can be focused on the victimhood of the Palestinians. This is something Mohammed Al-Kurd covers in Perfect Victims, which if you haven't read, you should. I'll put a link in the description as well as a card. But in focusing on their victimhood, sometimes we can forget that there are bad actors within Palestinian society. Starting at the top, we have the incredibly corrupt Palestinian Authority led by the shame to his people Abu Mazen, the pawn of the Israelis, and all the way down to these sorts of people profiteering from a war. I want you to imagine these are Palestinians. And there will be a reckoning afterward, as there were already. The Israelis tried to see, look at these murders that Hamas was conducting during the recent ceasefire, so-called ceasefire. Remember, with Israel, ceasefire is, just means we kill you more slowly. That's what ceasefire means in Hebrew. And it was effectively the death penalty was being put forward on people who'd committed treason against the people of Palestine. And that's a completely justified response. And I'm sure that there may have been excesses. Maybe not every single execution was a just one. But in most cases, if there are people doing this, war profiteering is certainly treasonous. Treason is punishable by death in almost every society from all time. This is from April of 2024. Even the trees in the garden that I have been looking after for 3 years are destroyed, especially in the southern side of the garden. Evil people. I just cannot imagine how passionate these people are and how evil is the way they satisfy their lust for killing and in torturing other people like this, regardless of race, color, or ethnicity. What mindset drives them to be so cruel? Now, this is going to be more difficult. Mom is talking about his wife's family. So his wife is named Mai, M-A-I, and she is about to suffer some deaths, and they have to figure out how to break this to her mother, much less Mai is dealing with it herself. So this is April of 2024. Salamat. Just a few hours ago, Mai's family's house was bombarded on purpose. Her brother, his wife, and his son and 2 nephews of her 2 other brothers lost their lives. 2 of her brothers were injured. How terrible it was to dig the rubble with bare hands to try to save the lives of the people still under it in vain. How painful it was to all of us when we finally could pick up the corpse of a 10-year-old girl before the eyes of her helpless father. How tormenting it was to all of us observing a helpless father who can do nothing to pick up his little daughter from the rubble before it was too late. How grieving it was when we had to leave the site because it became so dark and dangerous to stay there, leaving behind people under the rubble who could be waiting a window of hope to be picked up. Do you remember visiting this house? We went there to see the kid with autism. You helped with purchasing the medicine called Speak from the US and brought it in through the WHO. In fact, you sat at the same spot where the missile precisely hit. Can you imagine that we go there regularly to see my mother-in-law? 2 days ago, we visited them. We could have been out of the picture by now. So this is a few days later, May the 3rd, 2024. Just 2 hours ago, we received the sad news of the death of Mai's second brother in his parents-in-law house bombing. We cannot go out to see what happened or to hospitals to confirm it. The local news pages on social media confirmed it from neighbors. You can say word of mouth spread via social media, most likely true. Mai is in the worst condition I have ever seen. She has lost 2 brothers and 2 nieces and 1 nephew. Now we hope Mai can bear these catastrophic conditions. She has been preferring death to hearing the sad news of her family. I am confident she is strong and resilient, but the shock was huge. My mother-in-law is here too, and she knows nothing yet. So this seems to be later in the same day. It is confirmed, and we've just buried him. This is a massively sad day. The task of finding a way to pass the sad news to Mai and her mother was one of the toughest in my entire life. As for her mother, we managed to hide the news until morning. Then I sat with her with the presence of my brother's wife. Mai could not bear it and stayed in her room so as not to reveal it and cause a shock to her mother. She also was still in a shock. We began talking about general issues in the past, and we had our breakfast together, only she and me. We had to make her eat because she would not eat any more for probably days out of her grief. From time to time, I used to mention the great number of martyrs the family introduced, and how we said farewell to many relatives, friends, and neighbors. We also talked about the rewards Allah bestows people accepting His destiny, and to those who are patient, and to those who trust that Allah will let martyrs into paradise, making them lead a pleasant and comfortable eternal life. At this point, my mother-in-law became aware that relatives were trying to say something sad. She kept asking if anything happened, and I replied with a negative answer, believing that she is being more and more prepared to receive the sad news without causing a shock that may cause a stroke to her. This is a consistent theme that we see with families all throughout, that they have to break the news slowly. Mourid Al-Barghouti talks about this with his mother. I'll put a link in the description to his memoir, I Saw Ramallah. If you haven't read that, that's another fantastic read, and gives you some insight into what it takes to break the news slowly to an elderly family member. My sister arrived home after an hour. I received her by the door and told her that I had not had a chance to tell her mother yet, but her presence too meant that something was not okay. Then a close female relative came in, which caused for sure that my mother-in-law figured out that we were about to tell her sad news. We and Mai all approached her very close and passed the sad news to her. We were about to lose her too, despite of all the preparation we made throughout the past hour. She grieved like a slaughtered bird. Now she is accepting the judgment and destiny of Allah, but still feeling massive pain. So September of last year, Dr. Barber asks, what is your life like these days? A significant portion of our time is spent securing water, both for daily use and drinking. We also spend a lot of time buying food, so there's a constant shortage of goods, and prices often go crazy high overnight. So we dedicate considerable effort to searching for essential items, particularly hygiene products. Another challenge we face is waiting in long queues at ATMs to withdraw our smashed salaries. To manage this, we need to register our names through pre-arranged Google Forms and wait for the list of names to be announced. Once it's our turn, we go to the bank, usually once and rarely twice a month, to get a portion of our deposited salaries after standing in long lines. Personally, I spend a lot of time planning and coordinating with our staff to ensure the smooth resumption of college education. Leading the continuous preparations for the new semester is quite complicated, especially with the frequent disruptions in cell phone and internet services. Some staff members don't even have internet access and have to walk several kilometers just to get connected. Additionally, I make and receive long phone calls daily to ensure that preparations are on track as we approach the semester start date of October the 12th, 2024. After 6 p.m., I usually gather with friends to relax and have some fun. By 9 p.m., I return home to spend time with my family, and we usually go to bed after 1 a.m. So, Dr. Barber, no way but forward. I can't promise that I'll be able to do it for sure, but I have talked to Dr. Barber about possibly doing a live stream. I didn't want to promise it because I think he's traveling to promote the book now, and I wasn't sure how it would fit into our recording schedule. But it's a great opportunity to ask him what are the fates of these families. He did give an update because the book ends in October of 2024 and then it goes to press, I think, at the end of 2024, beginning of 2025. So he provides in the epilogue a brief update there. And I think we can say for the live stream to ask between January of 2025 and potentially we'll do a live stream with him in December of 2025. What's happened in the last year to the family? And part of me doesn't want to hear that anything has happened to these people because I, in a very attenuated way, have had a chance to get to know them through this book, through Dr. Barber's hard work. And so I'm invested in their story in a way. But we'll have to see what happens. I don't know. I'll have to ask Dr. Barber if he can come on a live stream, and we'll see. Just if you stay subscribed to the channel, you'll see updates about it. And in the meantime, I consider buying the book so you can read the story and have your own questions to ask Dr. Barber about any of these people. You can find a link in the description to buy it. That's one of the ways you can support this channel. I've already said before, one of the easy ways you can support this channel, hit like, subscribe, restack it, share it with people who would not otherwise know about this and want to hear firsthand accounts of what's happening in Gaza right now. And this book is a way to get that word out. If you'd like to thank me for this presentation, there's links to PayPal and Buy Me a Coffee below. If you want to get early access to videos like this one, as well as get a monthly video behind the scenes, talk with me about what I'm thinking and what I'm reading, you can use Substack. That's an easy way to support our work. Remember that 100% of the profits from the different income streams, be they YouTube if it ever gets monetized, but Substack primarily goes towards the Palestine Children's Relief Fund, their medical charity that helps Palestinian children get medical care who could not otherwise get it. It's a wonderful cause. Consider supporting them through their website. Go to pcrf.net and see what they're doing. Support them directly or support them indirectly by getting the word out with our book. A continual reminder also for our other fundraiser we're doing for the Hind Rajab Foundation, the sticker fundraiser. We have a small sticker and the occupation, and then 2 larger stickers. And 100% of the profits from this fundraiser will go to the Hind Rajab Foundation, which if you don't know about the Hind Rajab Foundation, you can search it online and you'll see that they're pursuing legal cases against Israeli war criminals. I understand that's a bit of redundancy, IDF war criminals. And that's a way for you to contribute and also get the word out. These are great conversation starters. Finally, there's my Amazon wish list below. If you'd like to nominate a book for the future, you can just go on there, browse. There's books in general. And those are for my other channel, which is Stephen Heiner. You can go check that out if you'd like. But obviously, any book on Palestine is for this project. So if you buy one of those books and send it my way, I'll do my best to review it in a timely manner. Until next time, enjoy your reading.